Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2022 Salmon Recovery Application Workshop. We're really happy to have everyone here attending, and we hope that you find this webinar to be a helpful resource when applying for a salmon recovery grant. So to start off this webinar, let's quickly cover some meeting etiquette. For the entirety of this meeting, attendees will be muted. So please take advantage of the Q&A function when you need to ask a grant manager a question throughout this webinar, and we'll take pauses to answer some of those questions. Lastly, this workshop will be recorded and available on our website for future reference. So let's meet the salmon staff. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Kendall Baramita, and I'm the administrative assistant for the salmon section here at RCO. In the middle of these photos is the leader at the helm, Mark Duboisky, and you'll be hearing from him soon. Two other people that you'll be hearing from are Catherine Moore and Alice Rubin, our senior grant managers. And you can see their photos here, Cat Moore at the top of the blue and Alice here on the right. Left of Mark is Jeannie Abbott, another great person that you'll be hearing about later in this webinar. And you may recognize some of these faces, and there might be some new faces, but Bridget Kaminsky down here in the middle and Sandy Dots here at the top are our two grant managers that we welcomed to the team last year. And so they've been a great addition to the team. Lastly, why don't we dive on in? We have two links here that will bring you to web pages that encompass multiple programs that RCO facilitates. So if you're looking for a schedule or other resources that have to do with the programs, or while you're doing anything for your application, please refer to these two links. I'm going to share them in the chat now with you all, and hopefully these will be helpful resources for you as well. So I'm going to pass it on to our leader, Mark Duboisky.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Kendall. My name is Mark. This is my 22nd year doing this, but my first not being a salmon grant manager. I'm trying hard to lead this team, hoping to travel many parts of the state with our crew. So I'm going to do the introduction. And before I dive into the salmon specific stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit about our agency, the Recreation and Conservation Office. Next. So the RCO is our mission is to work with others to protect and improve the best of Washington's natural and outdoor recreation resources. The agency has two primary grant sections. The primary part of our agency, which we were founded on in 1964, was the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board, and they manage grants for both recreation and wildlife conservation with some salmon habitat conservation. And then our team, the salmon section, known as the SURF Board, SRFB, Salmon Recovery Funding Board, we work directly with the Governor's Salmon Recovery Office, which is currently housed in the RCO. And Jeannie Abbott is our key staff member from the GSRO that works intimately with us and manages the lead entity and salmon recovery region contracts. RCO oversees and staffs the GSRO, the Invasive Species Council, and the Habitat and Recreation Lands Coordinating Group. But most of our work revolves around public funding. RCO also has a grant services section that takes care of the whole agency's long-term compliance and cultural resources needs. In fact, just last year, we added our very own archaeologist, first one ever. Her name is Sarah J. Forget her last name. I think it's Humphreys. Anyways, next slide. So before we dive into the salmon stuff, I wanted to talk about some of the other programs that are managed by the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board. The ones listed on the screen are what are administered by that board, but the ones with checks or bold are the primary ones that also can serve salmon recovery needs, and oftentimes will match our surfboard and PSAR dollars. And those are the ALEA account. Some of you are probably familiar with the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund, or known as LWCF. That's administered by the National Park Service. And then the big program is down at the bottom. That's the state's Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program, or WWRP. Next. Now, you know that the salmon team manages surfboard and PSAR grants, but we also manage all these other salmon programs. And so I wanted to highlight these. I call this my logo slide because I had to show all the other partners that help us co-manage these programs. So we co-manage the Brian Abbott Fish Barrier Removal Board program with Department of Fish and Wildlife. We also co-manage the Estuary and Salmon Restoration program with Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then we co-administer the Family Forest Fish Passage program with both DNR and Fish and Wildlife. And then we have a grant program called WICRI, or Washington Coast Restoration and Resiliency Initiative. And that's co-managed with the Coast Salmon Partnership, the Wild Salmon Center, and the Nature Conservancy. And then we also have our last big funding program that we co-manage with the Department of Ecology and the Department of Fish and Wildlife, called the Chehalis Basin Strategy. And that's focused on doing habitat restoration and flood damage reduction projects, specifically for the Chehalis River Basin. Next. So let's get to why we're here today. These are the surfboard administered funds, and they're broken out into three pots. The salmon money split into two different categories: salmon state, which comes directly from the Washington State Legislature, and then we have our salmon federal money, and that comes from NOAA, and that's from what we call the PACSURF, Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund. And then we have the third pot, which we co-manage with another state agency called the Puget Sound Partnership, and that's called PSAR funds. And you'll learn a lot more about this from Kat later in this workshop. Next. So just to give you some highlights of our investments over the last 21 years, we have about 3,300 projects we've funded over that time period. Our share of funding out of the three pots is a little over $1 billion. And that's a billion with a B. And then with the match, our total investment is almost 1.4 billion. Pretty impressive. Next. Why are we investing all this money? Because we have these 14 listed species around the state. And you can see, working from the left to the right, we have specific stocks that are in crisis in the red. And then we have a couple stocks that are approaching their abundance goals and are the furthest along to potentially be delisted from the Endangered Species Act. And those two are the Hood Canal Summer Chum and the Snake River Falls Chinook. Next. Okay, so how do we distribute these funds? Let's go over a little bit of the structure. We're going to start at the high level. We have 8 salmon recovery regions, and each region has their own salmon recovery plan that has been adopted by NOAA Fisheries. And those kind of serve as the foundation for addressing all 4 H's: harvest, hatcheries, hydropower, and habitat. And so the regions have the task of dealing with all things salmon. And in the recovery plans, it should identify projects, habitat restoration projects, that need to be advanced to help us achieve our habitat recovery goals. Next. So then as we move down from the 8 regions, you get into the individual watersheds, or what we call lead entity groups. And these 25 groups, they have been tasked with developing salmon recovery strategies, typically habitat specific, that identify high priority projects to address their high priority salmon and steelhead species and their life history stages. This is the Washington way. It's locally driven habitat strategies, locally led project development, evaluation, and rankings that get submitted to us for funding consideration in the late summer, early fall. So your first step as potential applicants is in applying for an RCO salmon grant, is to contact your lead entity coordinator in your local watershed to obtain their local timeline, so you know how to apply through their process. The link on this page will take you to the RCO website to help you find your lead entity coordinator and your surfboard grant manager if you need to contact them. You will also find this information in Appendix A of our Salmon Recovery Manual number 18. Next. Okay, so everybody always asks, how much money is available? Well, the surfboard has already approved $20 million for this grant cycle of our the two pots I mentioned earlier: salmon state funding from the Washington State Legislature, and salmon federal funding from NOAA, the PAC Surf Fund. There may be more money added to this pot. The surfboard is deliberating on options at their March board meeting to figure out whether we should add more money to the regional allocation model, or should we add more money to our new funding program called the Targeted Investments. And Kat will be sharing more information about that new program in a few moments. What you see here on the screen is the regional allocations that the surfboard updated and adopted in 2017. So each region gets their percentage or share of the 20 million that I just mentioned. And like I said, the number could be higher. And so they'll get their percentage applied to whatever number the surfboard adopts for this year's grant cycle. Next. Before I throw it over to Kat Moore, is there any questions right now? I don't see anything in the Q&A. Great. Well, next up is one of our senior grant managers, Kat.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kat Moore. I'm a grant manager for the San Juan County lead entity and the North Olympic Peninsula lead entity. And I'm going to talk to you guys today about what's new. This is a short webinar this year because we don't have a whole lot that's new. And so we just wanted to focus on what's new, some changes to Prism, and answer any questions. And then we have our workshop from last year that we recorded, and it's online, and it's in segments, so you can look at, eligible projects, how to apply, or you can watch the whole thing. So we're not going to go through everything with you today. We're just going to hit what's new, what's changes in Prism, and answer any questions that you have. Next. So what's new in 2022? This year's a PSAR round. So if you're in a Puget Sound lead entity, we'll be soliciting projects for the Puget Sound Acquisition and Restoration Fund project. As Mark mentioned, we have a new program called the Targeted Investment Program. We have implemented some riparian buffer width requirements for projects with the primary purpose of riparian planting. And we have some Prism changes about how you show your potential match and also how you report match through billing, and also some changes from in our cultural resources page on the application. Next. So just a reminder, starting a new application, always work with your lead entity, what Mark was just talking about. For some of our other grant programs, you can start applications directly into Prism. But for our salmon recovery program, we start our projects in the Salmon Recovery Portal, which is another database. We used to call it the Habitat Work Schedule, if that's familiar to you. Often your lead entity coordinator will be the one to enter in your projects into the Salmon Recovery Portal. Sometimes lead entity coordinators like it when their sponsors enter those projects in. So just check with them how they'd like to do that. Once you get it started in the portal, it'll spit out a Prism number, and then you can log into Prism through the SAW account, and Alice will show you that new change. And then you can get going on your application. The only caveat there is if you are applying to one of these different programs, to the PSAR Large Capital Program or the Targeted Investment Program, or if you have a monitoring project, you need to call or email your grant manager so that we can flip a switch in Prism and allow you to apply to one of those programs. When projects come over from the Salmon Recovery Portal, they automatically are called Salmon State. And that's, in Prism speak, how we track, at least through the application process, all of the salmon projects and the regular PSAR projects, but not the large cap or the targeted or monitoring. So if you have a question, you can always contact us. Next slide. So first I wanted to talk to you about the PSAR program. As Mark mentioned,
Hey, Kat, we lost your audio. Sorry, folks. We'll get this squared away. Kat? I'm assuming everybody can hear me as I'm trying to find Kat's audio.
Correct. We can hear you, Alice. I think
Okay.
Kat just cut out. Thanks everyone for your patience.
She was on her phone, so maybe her phone hung up or something.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give her a second. So stick with us, folks. Can stretch or get a drink, sip your coffee. We'll give her a minute. I think she had to restart her Zoom or maybe her computer. Hopefully not her computer.
Yeah, we can give Kat a little bit more time, and
Yeah.
then if she can't get logged back in, I can roll
Yeah.
with the slides and wing it, because I haven't worked out any script for these, but should be fun.
Thanks everybody again for your patience.
Okay, well, Kendall, I'm gonna take it from here, and then if Kat jumps in, then she can just pick up whatever slide we're on. Again,
Thanks,
this is Mark, and yes, this is the even year is always our big funding year because we get in the infusion of PSAR money, and the money won't be available until July 1 of 2023, the start of the new biennium, but we always build our project lists ahead of that. And there's two categories. There's the regular PSAR, which is the first $30 million of what the legislature allocates to the program. And then anything that goes over $30 million gets dedicated to the large capital project program. Next. So new this year, the Surf Board adopted this new program last year. It's called the Targeted Investment Program, and it's focused on a single priority criteria of habitat projects that benefit Chinook salmon stocks, critical for prey for the southern resident orca. And you can learn more about this in Appendix J of our Manual 18, and it breaks down the specific evaluation criteria. And our review panel will actually be scoring projects, which is unique. It's a little bit different than how they normally evaluate our surfboard and PSAR projects. They will actually be coming up with a quantitative score and a ranking through that process. Next. These are regionally led. You can see the bullets on the screen that each region gets to submit one project per region by the June 27th application deadline. You can have more projects start out through the early application site visit process, but by the June 27th deadline, each region needs to narrow it down to one project, your best project essentially. Next. Next, we have new riparian buffer width guidelines for our riparian projects, and that is in Appendix K of Manual 18. Next. So these are for projects that are riparian planting only. That's the primary purpose. We do have many restoration projects that have a secondary purpose of riparian plantings, but that doesn't fall into this category. So these are truly our riparian planting projects around the state. And you have to follow the Fish and Wildlife Volume 2, Riparian Ecosystems Volume 2 management recommendations. And then you can also utilize their online mapping tool to help figure out some of the riparian width requirements for your areas. Next. So the key this year for riparian projects is the classic site potential tree height. And these need to be tree heights at 200 years of growth. And there's two regions, a forested ecoregion and a dryland region. And you can see that the widths are based on the edge of the active channel or the active floodplain. And also on the dryland side or the east side, your 200-year site potential tree height, if available, or it could be the width of the riparian vegetation community, or at least 100 feet. So there's different nuances to the two different ecoregions. Next.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Why don't you pause here, because it sounds like we're getting Kat back in as a panelist, and maybe she can pick it up at this spot. If everybody just gives Kat a minute to get reacquainted to Zoom. Her audio is getting connected, and then we'll let her get back started up. Thank you, Mark.
Just so everybody knows, Kat's on Orcas Island. And so it's kind of a rural area. Maybe some of the squirrels that turn the generator for the internet stopped running.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, thanks.
I'm so sorry, guys. I knew I should have gone somewhere with a wired line. Oh well, okay, so we're on riparian. Thanks for covering. So do you want me just to pick up, Mark?
Yes, I have not said anything about this slide.
Okay. So although we've set a buffer width standard, we recognize that meeting the requirement won't be possible at every site. So in order to implement this standard, we're providing funding with no match when your project meets the standard. If you can't meet the standard, then you'll bring 15%. You'll need to bring 15% match. So for a lot of you, the project, your projects will remain the same. You'll bring 15% match. But if it's possible to meet that standard, we're offering, a no match grant program. So we hope it's an opportunity to do more. Next slide. So there are exceptions to the buffer width requirement. First, Mark probably touched on is this is only, the requirements are only if you're really just doing a riparian planting project and that they're not just ancillary to your primary purpose. We hope that you can plant as wide a buffer as you can, even on projects that aren't primary purpose riparian planting, but it's not required. So that's an exception. Then also, if your site has certain limitations that you can't plant the buffer width due to a structure or a property line, to a road or railway, to some utility, or if the topography just really impedes you from planting that full width. And also, this isn't an exception per se, but instead just an acknowledgement that we are looking at your project at what we call a work site level. So for those of you who have applied in Prism, you know that we set up our projects at a work site and then multiple properties under each work site. And we collect our data at the work site level. So you may have multiple properties at one work site, and you're going to tell us what is the width, the average width that you're planting at that work site. So we're not looking, if some of your properties are able to meet the standard or exceed the standard and some of yours aren't, as long as the average is meeting the standard, that's what we're looking for in the data that we're collecting. Next. Now there are some additional requirements if your project is located along a stream that's listed for temperature on the 303D list. So if you can't plant the required width on and your project is located on a stream that's listed for temperature and it doesn't meet one of those exceptions we just talked about, you'll need to provide additional justification about why your project still provides an important riparian benefit, and you'll need to provide a letter of support for your project from either a natural resource management tribal biologist whose usual and custom areas include the project location, or your WDFW habitat biologist for the area. Next slide. So that's what we have for new things that are new. I'm sorry about that technology glitch, but at least we tested that Mark actually knows what's new this year. So thank you, Mark. And
I guess it's
I'm
my
sure
turn.
he can answer questions, ask them now, or contact us at any time.
Yeah. Thanks, Kat and Mark. So now we're going to talk about the changes that we've made to Prism based on the changes that Kat and Mark just reviewed. Next slide, please. And I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Alice Rubin, and I manage salmon recovery grants in the Snake region. So before I jump into our changes, I wanted to give a little quick tips for you all to think about as you start and work on your surfboard applications. First of all, be thorough with your answers. Sometimes if there's something that you think you're going to say at the site visit, make sure it's in your application. The application serves as the basis of how your projects are reviewed by the technical review panel and also your local review and ranking teams. We have an application checklist in Manual 18 Appendix C as a resource to help remind you what is required for your application to be complete. Most of it is helpful attachments. Those of you who are return customers know that we have a page in Prism to attach extra information about your project, like maps and photos. And there's a required application attachments checklist on that page, but that checklist isn't complete for what we require as attachments, because there are just some attachments that required attachments that apply only to certain types of projects. Like if you have a barrier correction project, we ask that you attach a WDFW barrier evaluation form. that is very specific to your type of project. So it can't be in that checklist because we cannot require it of all projects. So those kinds of things. So use that Appendix C as a tool to help. When you're in Prism, make sure you save often. If you stop working on it, if you've gotten a phone call or you go to lunch or something, Prism will time out and your work will be lost on the page that it's on after a certain amount of inactivity. So make sure you click save. When you use Prism, if you use the next button, that will save your work automatically, but it's always good to make sure you save if you've put some hard work into your application to make sure it's in there. Start your application and finish your application early. This ensures that if you've missed something, you have enough time to go back in and fix it. Also, I suggest not only starting and finishing early, but working on Prism during business hours. That way, if you have a technical problem or you need assistance from a grant manager or your lead entity coordinator, we can guarantee that somebody will be around to answer your questions. Make sure you submit your Prism application by the lead entity deadline, as Mark mentioned, and there's a link in the chat if you don't know who your lead entity is. The lead entities have their own schedules and embedded within the grant round schedule, and your applications are due at least 2 weeks before the lead entity site visit. So depending on where you are and your project is located, you'll have a different due date than other people across the state. And of course, ask for help. Don't hesitate to call a grant manager or a lead entity coordinator if you need help. That's what we're here for. We're glad to provide assistance. We can usually help problem solve pretty quickly. And we don't want you to spend hours trying to figure something out on your own if it's something that we can help you with very quickly. We want you, we want to make sure that you're efficient with your time too. And also, we have a Prism help desk. So if you're having technical assistance with Prism, you can use this email address here, and it's on our website and on Prism if you need it. So if you can't get a hold of somebody, or if you know that it's just like a technical glitch with Prism, you can email our help desk directly and they can help you. Next slide. So this is pretty much already covered. This is the information that I'm going to talk about today. We have a new 2-step sign-in for Prism, and then all the changes that we've made regarding the topics that Kat discussed earlier. Next slide. So, 2-step sign-in. We have shifted sign-in to go through Secure Access Washington, which we call SAW. Now, the easiest way to access Prism is still through the Prism login link that you've always used. So when you click on that link, you'll be directed to SAW. Now you have to establish a SAW account, which is separate to your Prism account. So if you don't have one, there's a sign up button on the page. So you'll do that. So you'll click on your Prism link and sign up or sign in on the login page to SAW. And before we move on, I wanted to let you know that SAW is managed by WATEC, which is a separate agency from RCO. So if you are having issues with SAW login, you need to contact the help desk using the help button on this page. RCO cannot help you with your technical problems on SAW. So we apologize for that, but that's how it's set up. So next slide, please. So you sign into SAW through the Prism link, and it should direct you to Prism automatically. The first time you do this, you'll have to also log into Prism Online. But after that, if you follow the Prism Online link, when you sign into SAW, Prism Online should then open. But every once in a while, this doesn't happen. So that's what this slide is for. Now, hopefully, if you're not taken to Prism Online directly, it is listed on your screen. As you can see, that's underlined here. So all you have to do is click Access Now, and you'll be redirected to Prism. However, if it's not listed as one of your services, you can add it as a new service, which is the item number 2. So when you click that link, next slide, you will go to, it will take you to this page where you find the service you're trying to access. And in this case, that's Prism Online. So you either click on the middle box, which is searching by the service, and then you'll find Prism Online in the list, or you can search by agency and you'll find the recreation and conservation on that list, and then Prism is listed as our service there. So just a heads up in case you have to navigate a couple screens after you log into SAW to find Prism Online. And hopefully you won't have to do that, but I've had that happen to me a couple times where I've had to click on the access link. I haven't had to be redirected yet, but just in case, I wanted everybody to be prepared that you can still get into Prism even if SAW doesn't take you there directly. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is going to be a little redundant and I apologize, but I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of our website. So when you open our website, which is rco.wa.gov, you'll be taken to our homepage. You can see that the link for our Prism login is in that green header at the top of the page, and that is on every page for our website. So no matter where you are on the website, you can get to that link. If you hover your mouse over the grants menu, this drop down will appear, this beige drop down. And we've got a lot of useful resources and links under the grants details section, which is on the left side of this drop down. And if you can see it, I've put some kind of like Cliff's Notes on what's on each of those websites. So apply for a grant. There's a sub-page that talks about Prism. There's Prism trainings if you're new to Prism. So it shows you, it takes you to a form if you need a Prism username and those kinds of things. So that's a great resource. And I'm sure that the help desk email is on there too. If you have an acquisition project, you can go to grant requirements and go to our acquisition toolkit website. And that has a ton of resources. It has all of our forms. It has the manual and lots of helpful guides to help you with our acquisition processes. If you're looking for another program or a different grant manual, you can go to our grant manuals page, which has all of the agency's grant manuals linked. The post-award information has both a billing page, which has billing forms, billing video tutorials for e-billing, and our billing manual, and also our compliance page for long-term compliance for restoration and acquisitions, which is like after your project and your grant agreement has closed for those types of projects. And lastly, if you're trying to figure out who to contact, you can go to contact a grants manager, and that will take you to our RCO directory. Next slide, please. Okay, so now is when I do the live demo, and I am going to share my screen. So if you all will give me a minute, I'm going to be trying to transition. And I'm only going to review the changes that are in Prism. So it's not going to be a full Prism overview like we've done in the past. So hopefully you all will stick around to see that. So can somebody tell me if you can see my website here?
It looks great.
Thank you, Kendall. So again, here is the Salmon Recovery and Puget Sound Acquisition website. You can see our grants menu in action. You just click here and it'll take you to this website. On the right side here are all the application forms that you might find helpful. Here's the grant manual, manual 18. Here is the state's schedule. And I'm going to click on Salmon Resources here, and that will jump down. And as Kat mentioned, this is just what's new for us this grant round. But if you are interested in hearing our training from last year that discusses the eligibility, project types, so how to apply, so like some details about other Prism pages that I'm not going to review, that kind of information, here's that video, the application workshop video. And also, if you wanted to have the appendices separately, they're listed at the bottom of the page here. So I encourage you to take a look around on this Salmon website, Salmon PSAR website. It's really useful, and we have a lot of resources for you to help you apply for your project. Okay, so let's say you've worked with your lead entity and you've gotten your application number and your application's been started in Prism. So you log into Prism online through SAW, and this is the page, the landing page you get to. Now, here is like recent activity. So if you're if you use Prism a lot, whatever you've been working on recently will be here. You can click on the applications button and it will list all the applications for your organization here that are open. So if you're applying, we have a lot of grant rounds that are open right now. So if you're applying for different grant programs, all of your applications will be listed if you click here. If you need to bill or progress reports, you can also use the project search. I like to type project numbers in here. If you know your project number and your project isn't listed here, this is a quick navigation. So first we're going to review targeted investments, the changes for targeted investment projects. And really, there's only one major difference between a targeted investment project and a regular surfboard or PSAR application, and it's on our worksite details page. Now, you recall that a salmon grant manager needs to assign your project as a targeted investment project. So first we need to do that before you'll see this change. So make sure you've talked to your RCO grant manager and that we've done that for you. So on this page, because our priority this year is for Southern resident orca, we have a question about a Chinook species and the stock type that benefits from your project. So you'll answer that question here. And what's great is that if you're like, oh, okay, I need to think about and understand how my project is going to be evaluated, this blue link will take you directly to that information. You can see it opened up a new tab and it jumps right to the orca recovery benefit scoring criteria. So you can understand the priorities of each Chinook stock for this this year's targeted investment program. So how your project, the potential points your project can earn. So it's really handy that we have that link in there. And I also wanted to point out that in the project proposal, our question number 1 is actually just instructions. And it's just, this is how we had to do it just because of how Prism is set up, that we had to have a kind of the instructions just had to be listed in a questions slot on the page. So it's pretty clear that, we tried to make sure you understand this is instructions. And here's that link again to the evaluation criteria. And it's actually the entire appendix. So it discusses targeted investment in full if you want to read the full appendix. And, we tried to put in here that you don't have to respond to this question, optional. So we don't expect to see any sort of dialogue in this box. So I just wanted to point that out to you. So those are the 2 differences for targeted investment projects. Okay. Now we're going to jump into a restoration project, and I'm going to show you all the other changes. And most of the major changes that you're probably interested in are the riparian buffer items that we've added to Prism to get all that information that Kat covered for, you know, match and exceptions, and new widths and that kind of thing that the new eligibility and information on riparian buffers asks about. So really it's in our restoration metrics section. And I wanted to also, since we're here, you can collapse all, which actually collapses all of your metrics. You know, we have each category has multiple metrics. So the other nice thing is if you have multiple work sites, you know, this page gets really dense really quickly. So you can actually roll up each website or work site, excuse me, if you want to work on them one at a time, just to make the page a little bit more digestible. So I'm going to scroll down, and I've already checked that this is a riparian habitat project and riparian plantings. So most of this should look familiar if you've ever had planting as part of your project. We actually had already asked the average riparian width. So remember Kat said it's average. The newest question is a site potential tree height. And you know, you can read it for yourself. Now WDFW has a tool, a map that tells you what the site potential tree height should be for the area you're working. So unfortunately on our metrics page, we can't have an active link, but you can copy and paste this link into your browser and it will go, oh, of course an error has occurred. Well, unfortunately, I can't demonstrate the map, which is really unfortunate. It was working yesterday. Maybe if I delete this part and it just says map journal, it'll work. Oh, no, that's not it. Okay, so I'm sorry. It's a DFW tool. Oh, you know why? Because I highlighted more than the website. Thank you for bearing with me, everybody. This is live presenting. Yes, okay, victory.
Hey,
Alice, there's
Yeah.
also a live link to it in
there
the
is?
restoration questions. And Mark, if I'm answering the question that's in there about targeted and PSAR. So I'm just typing away.
Great.
Perfect. I just wanted to compliment Alice on letting all of us listen to her thinking out loud. That was sweet.
Got to keep it interesting, right? So this is a WDFW tool. You can see it opens just to the state of Washington. What I've done a little playing around in this tool so I could be prepared for this presentation. And I find it helpful to start with this base map gallery and turn on. You can see that if you use Esri tools before, this should look pretty familiar to you. And, you know, the most commonly used base maps are the imagery hybrid or topographic or streets. And so I'm going to go with topographic. And so you can see it fills in all the blanks there, because when you start zooming in with that base map blank, it gets really hard really quickly to find your site with all the layers turned on. Speaking of layers, they're here. And so all the checkboxes are the ones that are turned on. If it's gray, that means you're zoomed out too far. It's a data heavy layer, so you have to be zoomed in a little bit closer for it to turn on. You can see that's true for these layers too. And so I was going to zoom in. So once you zoom in to a certain level, that, you know, that overlay turns off and the other layers become visible. So you just kind of zoom in. Oh, I also wanted to say, I tried using this bar And the instructions here are very helpful. It does suggest that you use this bar to search for your place, but it never has worked for me. It has, you know, you get like the spinning wheel that it's thinking, but I've never gotten it to like zoom to the location. So I just wanted to let you all know, if you do that, you might be sitting around and waiting for a while. So using your scroll bar on your mouse will probably get you there faster. You know where your project is located. So once you get to where your project is located, you just click on the map and you'll get your site potential tree height. Here at this location, it's 245 feet. And it differs from place to place. It's really interesting. So you might have a place where, or a project where your property boundary crosses these lines. So this is 239 and this one is 227. So your site potential tree height, let's say your property boundary crosses this. So like Kat said, we use averages. So and because we collect metrics on the worksite level, not the property level. So, you know, you'll have to, if you have multiple properties, or if the site potential tree height line bisects the property you're working on, you might have to do some averaging, a little bit of math for that. So that's all I'm gonna do on this map. Like, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what it looks like and what you'll see when you go there to enter your site potential tree height. These are just made up numbers that I made up for this workshop, so don't worry about if it's right or not. So that's our metrics, and we also have questions. Excuse me, I'm going backwards and I apologize. We have, supplemental questions based on your project type, and we've added some for riparian planting. So when you get to your supplemental questions portions of your project proposal, you'll have to answer this question. If it's a no, then you see it collapses, you move on. But if the primary activity of your project is riparian planting, then you get fed a series of additional questions. And this goes into those exceptions and those rules that Kat covered, thinking about match. And if you have a 303D listed stream for temperature, we want to know if why your project still has benefit. You have to have those two letters, one from you telling us about the benefit and one from the biologist, either from DFW or your local tribe. So, oh, here's the live link that Kat referred to. But so we have a link here also to the 303D list that is managed by the Department of Ecology. And before I open that link, I wanted to show you that we have an info button that is a narrative that walks you through how to use this tool. And there's also a link here. So I'm going to click on that. And again, it opened a new tab in your browser. So Prism is still there. So the 303D list is the water quality assessment. And as I said, it's maintained by the Department of Ecology. So if you're not familiar with this, it looks a little daunting, but it's not that hard, I promise. So first of all is the medium, and you can choose water because we're working in streams and rivers. So you'll choose that. And then you saw it blipped, so it loads, for water bodies. So I suggest you can look up by county. That is probably helpful. Or maybe your WIRA, although WIRA is a really large scale and so is a county. But your water body type or your water body name might be the easiest, though obviously this list is very long. Oh, and parameter, excuse me. I'm sorry for jumping around. I missed that. So medium and parameter. Parameters are also alphabetical, so you'll scroll to the bottom and find temperature because that is what we are looking for, and that should hopefully also narrow down. But I'm just going to use Walla Walla because I'm not sure what the listings are in where their temperature listings in Walla Walla County, though I'm pretty sure there are temperature listings in Walla Walla County. Okay, so there are. So you can see that once you hit search, you get to a new window and it's listed all the segments that are listed for temperature. Now, obviously, you have no idea what where it is. So you can, I'll click on the Tushi River. You can click on the Atlas link. So the Atlas is a map. And if it works, yes, it zooms right in to the Tushi River where the segment is listed. And the listings are 4 or 5 are the ones that are impaired. So we can see it's a category 4, so we know it's impaired for temperature. So it's not so difficult if you know what you're looking for. So don't get intimidated by that table. And we've also provided a link to a directory of projects to help you understand who your TMDL lead at the Department of Ecology is for the watershed you're working in. And the TMDL leads are a great resource also to help you understand if your stream is listed for temperature. So if you're not quite sure or you don't want to use the tool or you have additional questions about the listing, you can find them here, and this should go to Ecology's website to find those folks. Okay, so that's all for the riparian questions that I wanted to walk you through. Next, I will talk about the match, the changes to match. See, I didn't save, and Prism wanted to make sure that was okay. So here's our cost summary page. So you filled out your metrics, you've which includes your project costs. You know, in the past, we used to ask about match on this overall project metrics page, but no more. All you do is your completion date. It's a kind of a short page now. So now you tell us about your match on the cost summary page. So this is what you have entered. This is your total project cost, which should equal your match plus your grant amount. This is where you tell us how much grant you're requesting. And then we get to the match. So we've got a button here. It's very similar to how like our permits page works, or when you add like what salmon species your project is benefiting. We also have an add button now for match. So we have categories of match. State funding is actually RCO grants. Other monetary funding is like other grants. I'll click on that so you can see what's listed. So we've got drop downs, which is really cool. So you can choose if you have a federal grant or a local grant or another state grant, like if you have ecology floodplains by design or something like that. You choose the appropriate provider as far as you know. And we understand that you might not have your match secure, so this is your best guess. So I'm going to put $5,000 here. And this is cool. We kind of have a list of potential providers. And so once you start typing, I don't know, I just started typing that. So you should get, you know, a list that you select. And then I don't know what their grant programs are called. But obviously you fill that in, we don't get a drop down of that. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. And I'm just going to add another one just for demonstration purposes. So you activate the drop down, you have to click it a couple times. State funding, like I said, this will list all the RCO programs that work with Surfboard. You know, you can have in-kind contributions, paid labor or unpaid labor, which is volunteers. So you fill it all out depending on what you hope will be your match sources. And you know, you have to click around a little bit. So once you selected something, you have to click out of it to get the next lines to appear. So just keep clicking. And if you've added too many lines, you can delete and say continue. And I'm going to save.
Can I pop in here real quick,
Yeah,
Alice?
please do. Thank you,
Yeah,
Kat.
that's okay. Yeah. So these will also be how you will report your match through billing. And so if there was a grant program called Something Cool, that would become part of your drop down that you could choose from in your billing. If it turns out that you don't get that grant and you have other match, then you can, during your billing process, you know, you'll have this same screen kind of replicated in the billing, where you'll tell us what your match source is now. And it will build and become part of a drop-down option for you for your billing. So it's just, it's gonna help you and us at the end of the life of your grant. For those of you who've had grants with us, you have to tell us about your match at the end of the grant through your final report. But as now we're doing it up front and through the billing. And so you no longer have to go back through your records and tell us again at final report, because it's just going to reflect what you billed, since we're dialing down and getting this type of information from you through the process. So hopefully it's a little bit of more work up front, but not at the end.
Thanks, Kat.
Yeah.
I saw there were some Q&As that popped up. Was there anything that we should go back to, or you got it covered?
Yeah, there is a good question that just popped up I haven't answered about design projects that don't require match. You do need to talk to your grant manager if you have one of those, because we have a default 15% match required for all salmon projects, which includes all the PSAR projects, targeted, PSAR large cap. They all require 15% just by default. So if you have a design only grant, which is a project that is producing a preliminary or final design and requesting $250,000 or less.
200.
200, sorry.
That's okay.
$200,000 or less, then we have to go in and flip a switch that says no match required in order to allow you to submit. So we'll try to catch those as, you know, your grant managers are on the other side of the computer screen, you know, watching as the applications come in. We poke our heads in them, and if we see something developing, someone developing a design only grant, a lot of times we'll check that box already. But if we haven't and you're having problems submitting, let us know, and we'll make it so you can submit.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kat. Okay, I only have one more thing that I was going to demo today, and I see there's still like 55 people around. So thank you so much for sticking around. And I hope that you all have found this helpful. So in the middle of the grant round last year, we added a mapping tool to our cultural resources page. So if you applied last year at the beginning of the grant round, when this page loaded, you would only see the questions. And the questions haven't changed. And as a reminder, they're asked by worksite. But what I wanted to show you is this mapping tool. And so now we no longer require you to attach a separate APE map for cultural resources review in your attachments. You're going to draw or upload a shapefile for the APE map directly on this page. So when it opens, it looks like this. And if you zoom in and out far enough, the locations that you have mapped on the worksite details page, I believe, appear. So this will help you navigate to your project location pretty quickly. However, you cannot enter your mapping or draw your map on this map. you need to click here. And before I do that, I wanted to show you, we do have a tutorial video, which at this time is more of my voice. Doing it, the tutorial, I believe, is less than 10 minutes. So if you get to this page and you're like, oh, I cannot remember how to do this, click on the tutorial. You'll go to a YouTube video that walks you through it again. So click on the full screen map, you get a new tab. So your application is still here. This is the mapping tab, and you can see it adjusted, it zoomed out to capture both of the work sites. I'm going to choose Thurston County because I'm biased because I live in Thurston County. So you use your mouse and you scroll in and out, and this is another Esri mapping tool. So you can see we've got very similar looking tools here like the DFW map did. You can hover to see what the items are. So worksite points, you click on that, that's the worksite point. Related boundaries, you actually might find very useful. So you check it to turn it on, and you can see that we've got some stuff that's already drawn. And if you click the caret, it will expand. So these are the section and township lines. I'm going to turn those off for now. We also offer parcel lines, and you can see they're from 2016 or section sub. Yeah, so the parcel lines you might find very useful. And if you zoom out enough, they'll go away. So you have to be zoomed in to a certain extent before they appear. So that might be really useful for you to turn on before you start drawing. And again, that's the layers list. Another thing is the base map gallery, which I covered in the DFW tool. You've got your imagery hybrid, your terrain with labels, other great stuff. I am going to do imagery hybrid. I bet that's one of the more useful ones. Now we get to drawing. So click on the edit map tool. You can draw, or if you have GIS, if you've created a shapefile already, you can upload your shapefile. I'm not going to cover that. It walks you through how to upload your shapefile if you click this. I'm going to zoom in some more. So this is Scatter Creek. We prefer if you draw a polygon. I've been told this by our cultural resources team. We do have points and lines, but it's, your project isn't really a point or a line. It's got width. So it's helpful to use a polygon. We want you to draw the disturbed area, the areas of disturbance. And if you have, if you're going to you're going to do restoration here, but you need to carve out a staging area here. Oops. I'm going to come back to that, I promise. Oh, it didn't even let me save it. Okay, so what my point is, you can draw multiple shapes for one work site. So make sure you do if you have disconnected areas that are going to be disturbed. So I'm going to go back to the shape. That's interesting. I learned something. So you draw your shape, you name the shape, and you can call this the restoration area. We do want to know if you have a structure that you're going to be removing or altering that's over 50 years old. It might be a historical structure, so that just helps us understand that. And it also helps us understand if it's a temporary access or staging area. You need to select the work site that it's associated with. And if you wanted to say, like, you don't have to write any notes, but if you think there's a note that would be helpful to know, you can type it here. So you click OK, and that is saved. And okay, now I'm going to do my staging area. We're going to say staging areas here. You might have temporary access that you have to carve out. So you want to draw that too. And now you can see how I type. And I'm going to call this, and it's still part of worksite 1. Okay, so I'm going to close this, recognizing that we have 2 work sites and that I did not draw one for work site 2.
Hey, Alice,
Yeah,
before you close it, we have a question.
okay.
Talking about how do you edit a polygon once you've already drawn it? Can you expand the restoration area or the staging area?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll click on it and you see it becomes selected and we get an edit. So you could edit it. If it's kind of curvy, it creates a point for all the curves. So this is straight. So it's got 1 point. Now it's got multiple points. So if you're like, oh, I meant to include this bit. Okay, that's better. Then you click OK. Or if you're like, oh, I just messed that up, I want to redraw it, you can delete it. I'm not going to do that, but you can. Great question. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to close. Oh, yes. So it takes a while. This is very data heavy and it's saving to a database. So it says, please don't close. It means this window. You can close this menu, but don't close the window until it says OK. I'm just going to leave it open. So what I was saying before that great question was that, okay, I recognize I have 2 work sites. I've only drawn 1. You can see like it's shown up on our map here, which is really great. If you check your page for errors, it's going to know that you are missing a map for the work site. So that's why you have to use that drop down and designate a work site. Even if you only have 1 work site, you still need to designate a work site. If you have multiple work sites, then you need to make sure you map. Oh, wow. See, we've got a work site that needs to be mapped. That's what this edit is telling you. So it's going to make you go back in. Oh, it's already open. That's right, because I didn't close it. So it's telling you go back in and draw your second work site. I'm not going to do that now for the sake of time, but you should do that and make sure that you associate those shapes with the second work site. Now, some of you might have assessments, or you might be doing invasive species projects that are like basin wide, or, so this tool will work great for 98% of our projects, and it's not going to be great for those large scale projects. And we recognize that, and I apologize for that. Work with your grant manager to figure out a great approach for it. And it's most likely going to be, okay, let's get something on the map here because we need to make sure that the mapping tool knows that we've got some stuff mapped, but also attach an APE map that shows the larger area. So we can still accept APE map attachments as supplemental project information if you need, if you need a large scale map or something like that. So don't struggle with it. Don't spend, we recognize that it's not a perfect tool and that it's going to be challenging for some of you. So just work with your grant manager and you all will figure out the best approach to meet this mapping requirement in Prism, but also providing the information that our cultural resources team is going to need to do the cultural resources review for your project. And that was all I was going to cover. I want to see if there were any more questions that we wanted to talk about, or if I missed something.
Yeah, let me add something, Alice. This is Mark again.
Thanks,
I just want to stress how important it is to get these polygons mapped as accurately as possible when you're submitting your application before your lead entity site visits. Because what we're trying new this year, since we have added an archaeologist and our cultural resource team has expanded, we want to be able to give you feedback a lot sooner, preferably after your application site visit. So if there's known artifacts or known cultural resource sites either on your property or near your property, we want to give you a heads up because it may change the scope of your
Mhm.
project. It may add costs
Mhm.
to your project. So we want you to be able to update your budgets ahead of the June 27th application due date. And then that'll help inform your lead entities and have accurate scopes and costs when they're
Mhm.
ranking your projects through the summer.
Yeah, that's great. I had also remembered something, Mark, as you were speaking. You can export your map. We have this, what we call hamburger menu here. And if you click on it, you can download your map data or your image. And when you click on that, I believe you'll get another window that opens, and you'll get I believe a PDF. I'm not going to do it here because sometimes it takes a little time, but if you drew a great map or you wanted to use the map for something else, another application, or, you know, for your files or something, you can do that there, or here in the actual drawing tool, which is great because you can control the layers. So if you wanted those, the section township range or the property boundary lines, that's available in this tool. So, okay, now I'm done. Any other questions or items that in Prism that I missed?
Yeah, please type them in the Q&A or the chat. I'll do some concluding remarks just to
Yeah.
wrap it up. And then if we get any questions, we'll answer them live while we're all here. There's a lot of the team on this call right now. So you've heard about our agency and our grant programs. You've heard about the new features, targeted investments, the riparian buffer widths, and this is our big PCR year, so we got a lot of money. You've also heard these great changes that Alice just went over, and that make sure you get your what do you call it, 2 sign-in SAW account set up for Prism if you haven't already. And then the key thing is to learn your local watershed's timeline, get in touch with your lead entity coordinator to see what the local timeline is and when like letters of intent may be due, or when your Prism applications need to be created through the Salmon Recovery Portal. That's all done with your lead entity coordinator. And so thank you very much. I don't see if there's any other questions. Does anybody else from the Salmon team have anything they would like to add? Oh, hold on. Somebody, Paul Anderson, can you repost links to the mapping tool and where the webinar recording will be available in the chat and Q&A, please? Yes, we can do that.
Which mapping tool? Sorry, there are multiple mapping tools. Did you mean the cultural resources tool or the WDFW tool? Site potential tree height.
Yeah,
okay,
we're good.
Yes.
I see Jason Lundgren. Did you have a question in there, Jason, about how challenging it is to balance all the Prism numbers and budgets and the different pages? I don't know if he's still on. Just comment. So I take Jason's comment as try to make it better and smoother and a little easier to use. Thank you, Jason. Anything else? Oh, something in the Q&A. Sorry, I didn't capture the demo on how to edit this culture resource map after a polygon created. Can you demonstrate again, please? Wow, Alice, can you pull that off?
Yeah, I can do that again. I'm for Paul, I'm pasting the link for the Salmon Recovery Grant website, and this workshop will be posted there if you scroll down far enough and click Salmon Resources. So I wanted to cover that really quick. Okay, I'm sharing my screen again. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, while you're getting it set up, Alice, Rowena works for the city of Kent, I assume. That's my hometown. Just a little shout out to Kent Ridge High School.
All right. Okay, so here's the cultural resources page. I actually never closed the link. So you click on the full map button to get to, oh, dang. You know, I did close it. I can't see because Zoom has, I'm going to reload the page. Zoom is covering my web tab, so I apologize. I can't see everything. Okay, so now we go. All editing is in the full screen map. So if you've, come back and you're like, I need to edit this. I apologize for like the quick zooming. I'm scrolling with my mouse. So select the polygon you want to edit and it will highlight blue and you'll get a pop-up box and click on the edit button. And so that's where you get your editing capabilities and you basically have to click on the little dots to move them. So when you have like a curvy polygon, you're going to get a dot for basically like everywhere the curve is. And, you could also change the work site if you designated the wrong work site. So you just do all your editing and you click OK and it saves. And again, it asks you to please wait. Now, if you're like, oh, this polygon isn't really that great and it's just going to be easier for me to redraw it, just delete it. It'll make sure that you want to delete it. And if you do, you say continue and it disappears. You go back into your editing tool, draw on the map and start all over again.
Good job, Alice. It looks like Rowena is dialed in. She said,
All right.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome, Rowena. I'm going to stop sharing my screen again.
All right. Well, I'll do one last quick scan of the questions. Nothing new. And it looks like Josh is trying to give some follow-up to what Jason brought up earlier in the chat. So check that out. But the key is we're all paid to help you guys. So call us. Call the grant managers. We know Prism inside and out. We will help you navigate all the funky nuances and help you to manipulate the right sections to help your grant application move through the process. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for everybody that attended and good luck this grant making season and hope to see you on some in-field site visits this spring. All right, have a great day.